The internationally respected Whitaker Wellness Institute proudly presents our educational video library created to help you continue on your path to optimum health. In this module, we'll take an overview look at hyperbaric oxygen therapy, as presented by Dr. Donald L. Jolly.
I'm so excited to be with you now to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's the subject of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, according to some people, is a newfangled thing that just got developed and appeared from nowhere. But I'm going to give you a little history lesson. The first hyperbaric chamber was made in 1662. That's a long time ago. There was no electricity, there were no computers, there were no great modern techniques to make hyperbarics as efficient as it is today. But it was a rudimentary chamber and it worked. And they used bellows to pressurize it. There was no compressors as we know them. Remember in the olden ancient times how the big ships used to be motivated by men down in the bottom of the ship rowing, maybe 200-300 people, and a guy there, boom, boom, with the drums, keep going, keep going. Well, guys had to pump bellows in order to get the pressure into the chamber. And even in those days, they knew what a one-way valve was, and so they had a one-way valve, and that's how they pressurized it. And it was used off and on for a couple, well, about 110 years, and then they developed a method of isolating oxygen. Rather than using the ambient oxygen present in the air to dissolve into the blood, they actually were able to isolate it. And from there came many advances. And now we live in a world where we have computers and automatic compressors and all kinds of things to make hyperbarics work very efficiently. What is hyperbaric oxygen therapy? Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is a very simple, elegant therapy. It's the utilization of pressure. There is a natural physical law that states that wherever there is pressure in a confined environment, that pressure will cause any gas present in that environment to dissolve in any liquid in that environment. And this definition is much more easily understood when we take a look at what happens at Coca-Cola bottling plant. When you mix all the stuff together, the water and sugar and caramel and caffeine and whatever goes into Coke, the very last stage of the manufacturing of Coca-Cola is infusing the carbon dioxide gas into the liquid. And they put it under pressure with a gas called carbon dioxide, and the pressure causes the gas to dissolve into the Coke. And that's how we get the fizz in the Coke. Well, it's about the same way we get dissolved oxygen in our body when we go into a hyperbaric pressure chamber. The pressure in the chamber that's being created by the compressors forces the 100% pure oxygen gas that we're breathing, more often than not, through a specialized mask device that allows us only to breathe pure 100% oxygen. As soon as that oxygen hits our lungs, actually what happens at that point is the pressure in the environmental chamber causes the gas, which is pure oxygen, to dissolve into our blood. Now there's something magic that happens. Our blood is composed of several different things. Major things are red blood cells, which we call hemoglobin, and the other major factor is plasma. Plasma is kind of a carrying fluid. The red blood cells float through the plasma and are delivered throughout the body to give off oxygen that they collect during the breathing process. So what happens is that our body needs oxygen, and we are given a certain amount of our blood volume that has the capacity to receive dissolved oxygen or to absorb oxygen at a normal atmospheric pressure, which most of us live at somewhat normal atmospheric pressure. But that part of our blood represents only about 15% of our total blood volume. If you look at my hands, You see the distance between my hands. Imagine that this represents about 100% of my blood volume. Now, about 15% is going to be about this much. And this much is red blood cells or hemoglobin. This is the only level of my blood that's capable of receiving oxygen. The plasma, the 85%, doesn't receive much oxygen at all. It just carries the red blood cells around to various parts of the body. When we are in hyperbaric conditions, when we are in a pressurized environment and we're breathing 100% oxygen, not only the hemoglobin is exposed to receiving dissolved oxygen, but the plasma, which represents 85% of our blood volume, gets the same infusion of oxygen as the hemoglobin. So we are oxygenating 100% of our blood volume with 100% oxygen. Normally, we're only breathing 20.8% oxygen. So you see the difference? The massive increase in the amount of oxygen that is dissolved into our blood and carried to every cell of our body. That really is a very magnificent reality, and it's one that should help us understand why hyperbaric oxygen is effective. What does hyperbaric oxygen do? Well, because oxygen is necessary in every healing area of the body, absolutely necessary. It's necessary for the modulation of the immune system. It's necessary to sustain life. Without oxygen, we can develop all kinds of wounds and sores that just won't heal, and in some cases lead to amputation of limbs and parts of our body. So it's very important that we have high levels of oxygen. So we look at oxygenation in a hyperbaric chamber as being something that its number one thing, it increases the level of healing. And in so doing, it decreases healing time by about 50%. About 50%. And in some cases, it starts a healing cascade where there will be none, because there's no way the body can deliver enough oxygen on its own, whether through a diabetic condition that causes restriction of blood flow or other problems in the body that restrict the blood flow. So what happens is that the hyperbaric chamber infuses great amounts of oxygen in what blood flow there is and begins a healing process where there would be none, and thereby avoiding amputation in many, many cases. So healing is one of the things. The production of small blood vessels is another very important thing. And it goes along with healing in most circumstances, but it does other things other than just heal wounds and sores. In our brain, for example, if we would have had a stroke or a brain injury or a hemorrhage or anything going on in the brain that would damage some blood vessels with a resultant damage to neurons in the brain, that could affect our neurological system, it could affect our muscular system, create paralysis, cognitive dysfunction, all kinds of problems. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy can accelerate dramatically a process called angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is the process of growing new blood vessels. The tiny blood vessels in the brain react well to the prompting of hyperbaric oxygen therapy in terms of growing new blood vessels, connecting them and supplying blood, which can help dramatically to improve healing in the brain. Also to help overcome the problems of a stroke, of a head injury. Some people have head trauma, they fall down on their head, or they fall out of a window, or they're injured in an automobile accident. It's another thing it does. It's extremely effective also for dealing with neurological problems.
Well, my wife was diagnosed with a brain tumor on the back of her brainstem about 10 years ago, and had 5 operations at that time, and they tried to take it, couldn't take it, did some X-knife radiation treatment on it, and stopped it from growing for basically 9 years until about a year ago, January, it started growing again. And so we went to UCI to a Dr. Linsky, specialist in brain tumors, and on September 27th of 2005, the tumor was removed completely, and so that was a good thing. But from that, My wife has not been able to talk for 6 months, and there's been other complications because of the brainstem damage and just some nerves and other things that have not reconnected. And so in December we came to Whitaker and started treatments in January, and have been here doing hyperbaric treatments and acupuncture and reflexology and IV and so forth. And she's really coming around, responding. She's moving all of her hands and feet and legs and communicating through some sign language and letters and through just nodding of the head and so forth like that. So making some good progress through the whole period. She was 5 months in the hospital and care facilities, and for the last month she's been home. So that's been, I think, a real boost in just everything, her morale, ours, and so forth. So.
Actually, hyperbaric oxygen therapy is effective in helping all areas of healing in the body, some faster than others. Traditionally, it's been used for carbon monoxide poisoning for decades. It's been used for a condition called osteomyelitis, which is a bone infection, very serious bone infection. It's been used for years to treat radiation poisoning, been used for years to treat some types of massive infections. The infection in vogue now is called necrotizing fasciitis. You probably know it as the flesh-eating bacteria. It's a vicious, vicious infection. It grows very, very quickly and oftentimes results in death, and more often in an amputation of some part of the body in order to halt its progress. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy is very effective with that particular infection as well as other infections. As a matter of fact, there's research being done now to show that hyperbaric oxygen therapy accelerates the production of your own stem cells. And the research is just beginning to proliferate. I'm very, very excited about that. And research is now committed in the area of the relationship between hyperbaric oxygen therapy and the possibility, and this is still research stage, of effectively treating some forms of cancer. So there's a plethora of things that hyperbarics can do. We know what it is. We know a little bit about its history. We know some of the things that it does. Now, what is it like to be in a hyperbaric chamber? Well, you are put in a chamber, which is an enclosed steel and or transparent chamber. There are some chambers that are transparent. You can lie down in them, and there's no restriction of vision. You can see everywhere. There are others that are made of steel with windows, and you can see out the windows. You're put in that chamber. The door is closed, and the environment in the chamber is pressurized. We talked about pressure being necessary to dissolve the oxygen into the blood. You breathe oxygen through a specially designed breathing system. It's very similar to the breathing system that a jet fighter pilot wears when they're way up in the 40,000 feet where there's no oxygen. They have a sealable mask, covers all the crevices, and delivers whatever mixture is to be delivered, whether it's pure oxygen or a mixture of oxygen and carbon dioxide or oxygen and air or whatever. And you are exposed in the chamber to pure oxygen. While you're in the chamber, you can watch videos. We have video presentations so that you don't get bored in there. You can read. It's fine to read in the hyperbaric chamber. We don't want you to take any metal articles in with you, because we don't want any sparks to occur. That's just for added safety. Although the type of chambers that we use ourselves at the Whitaker Wellness Institute are very safe. We don't utilize oxygen directly in the environment of the chamber, which minimizes any kind of risk at all. So it's a very safe procedure. We follow the same protocol that UCLA Medical Center follows in using their hyperbaric therapy equipment. We have, I think, probably treated or administered over 35,000 treatments. And that's a lot of treatments. We have a lot of experience in treating many different conditions and a lot of experience helping people overcome whatever little problems they may have about going in a chamber. You know, we're not used to going into a small confined area, and we need to look at that as something, if it's a problem, to be overcome, which it can. That's not difficult at all. It's just a matter of doing it, and we certainly can teach you, be close to you, and be with you during the process so you don't have that particular problem. Hyperbaric therapy needs to be done on a consecutive level. It has to be done every day for the best results because it is a cumulative therapy. Once you start, one treatment builds on another, on another, on another, on another. And if you take off for 3 or 4 days, you lose that cumulative effect. And that's something that we particularly don't want to happen because it just delays the good results that we hope to get. I certainly could say much more about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but I think we've covered some of the major issues that will help you understand what it is, and I would certainly invite some questions, and I hope that I would have the answers for you so that you will understand even better as it relates to your specific conditions and/or concerns. We certainly specialize in diabetes at the Whitaker Institute. We have many patients who come to us whose blood sugar levels are out of control. Many of them are on insulin. They're locked into it. Some of them are gaining weight from insulin. Their whole lives are affected. And they come to us because they want relief from their drugs. They want to learn. They want to develop disciplines that will help them deal with their disease. So, number one, we teach them. We teach them things that work and point out things that don't work. Everything begins with what goes in the mouth. Every treatment begins with what goes in the mouth. Proper nutrients, proper hydration. Keep away from what doesn't work. Processed sugar products don't work. White flour products don't work. So we teach people what works and what doesn't work. We use supplements in place of drugs. We find supplements or combinations thereof which will be effective at helping to control the blood sugar levels. However, nutritional consciousness is a big factor in blood sugar levels. And then the supplements become an adjunctive factor. That's very important. Exercise is extremely important. Without exercise, you are going to really be burdening yourself with a lot of negative factors that need not be there. Exercise takes care of them. For example, Dr. Whitaker often says that if after every meal you will walk for 10 to 15 minutes, that you will draw the glucose levels away from your blood into the physical activity of walking. Therefore, you will reduce the negative effect. And if you're taking something that's going to help them be assimilated or get into the body more slowly, between that and your walk, you're doing yourself a great service. So with these things, and once in a while, you know, medications that the doctors may prescribe, but with these things, we look at hyperbaric oxygen therapy as adjunctive. Certain damage takes place with diabetics. Whenever there's a glucose spike, there's an insulin spike. You know, if our brain level gets too much glucose, we can suffer greatly and die. So the body knows that. So the